Hi, my name is Elise, and you're listening to Chatterbox Island English Podcast. Hello and welcome back to Chatterbox Island English Podcast. I'm your host, Elise. If you're new to this podcast, hello and welcome. This is an all-English podcast, but we don't talk about grammar rules or vocabulary like other English learning podcasts. Instead, we just talk about some easy and everyday topics. And I usually put all the keywords down in the description, so feel free to check them out if you want to. And I hope you'll find this show interesting. And be sure to subscribe if you enjoy the content. So in the last episode, we talked about the impact of streaming services on both the music industry and music consumption. If you haven't listened to that episode, you can go check it out after finishing this one. And if you want to listen to any previous episodes of this podcast, you can click on any platform that you're listening to right now. And for today's episode, I want to talk about another language-related topic, which I personally always find very interesting. So the last time we talked about if speaking different languages changes your personality. And today we're gonna talk about when is the best time to learn a new language. Again, I am assuming you guys who are listening to this podcast right now speak at least 2 languages, Mandarin Chinese and English, or even more. And you probably remember how you learned to speak your second language. But do you remember how you learned to speak your native language? I think native language comes so naturally for us that we don't actually consider any grammar rules, parts of speech, or even like sentence structures when we speak. It's almost like an instinct. That's why sometimes we find it a bit difficult to explain to or teach a foreigner how to speak our native language. And in the field of linguistics, we actually don't say that we learn our native language, but that we acquire it. So it's not like something that we learn intentionally, but more like something that we acquire naturally as an ability. And when a baby is born, his or her brain is like a blank page. And according to a study done by Patricia Cole, who is a linguistic professor from Washington University, a baby's brain can tell the difference among 800 sounds, meaning a baby can acquire basically any language that he or she is exposed to. And I'm not sure if everyone has this experience, but sometimes when we learn a new language, we can't really tell the difference between 2 foreign sounds, and that is because our brain just physically cannot do so, because we are so familiar with one language that we kind of lose the ability to tell the difference between other language sounds. But after about 12 months, infants begin to lose their ability to hear the differences between foreign language sounds and are only familiar with the sounds that they hear the most. So scientists are also curious. What if a baby is born in a bilingual family? And at first they believe that this will confuse the baby and make it difficult for he or she to acquire languages or even cause language delays. But turns out it's quite the opposite. So even though at first a bilingual child might combine 2 languages when they speak, so let's say that a child was born in a family where both Mandarin Chinese and English are spoken. When the child starts speaking, he or she might mix both Chinese and English in one sentence unintentionally. But once they get older, they will be able to distinguish between the 2 languages. So I took a selective course called Psycholinguistics when I was in college, and we actually covered this topic in class. I remember the professor showing us a video of a bilingual child talking to her parents, and the child was around like 2 to 3 years old, and she could speak Spanish and English. The child could switch between the two languages when her parents interacted with her in either of the languages. This is called code switching in linguistics. But what's more interesting is that the child would automatically code switch depending on who she is speaking to. So let's say in this bilingual family, the mother is usually the one who speaks Spanish to her, while the father usually talks to her in English. And the child would most likely speak Spanish to her mom and speak English to her dad. So the child could actually switch to Spanish mode or English mode when she is speaking to different people. And researchers have actually shown that code switch in bilingual child's language development gives them extra cognitive advantage when it comes to learning. So they might be able to understand new things faster, or they might be able to learn new things faster. But not many of us were born in bilingual families. And does that mean that we will never be able to acquire or learn our second language as fluently as our first language? Well, the answer is no. According to a study done by Josh Tenenbaum, who is a professor of brain and cognitive sciences in MIT, if you want to acquire native-like knowledge of a second language, you should start by around 10 years old. So they found out that 10 to 12 years old is the critical age of language acquisition because of the neurological mechanisms in humans' brains. So to answer the title of this episode, which is when is the best time to learn a new language, the answer is 10 to 12 years old. But of course, I'm sure most, if not all, of you guys who are listening to this podcast right now have way past the age of 10 to 12. But that is not to say that you can't learn another language and speak like a native if you start now or even later. Age is just one of the factors in language learning. It can be harder and take more effort to learn another language as you grow older, but I think what really matters is having the motivation to do so and keep on practicing the language in your daily life. And I think practice really makes perfect when it comes to language learning and speaking, in my opinion. So when did you first learn a foreign language? And are you learning a third or maybe fourth foreign language right now? Do you find it more difficult to do so now that you are older? Let me know your thoughts down in the YouTube comment section or Apple Podcasts review section or even our Facebook fan page, and I would love to know. And that's all for today's Chatterbox Island English podcast. If you enjoy this episode, you can subscribe to our show on Anchor, Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, KKBox, and SoundOn. You can also find our shows on YouTube and go on our website, that's www.eisland.com.tw for more information. I'm your host, Elise, and I will talk to you soon in the next episode. Bye!